My name is Abby Atwood. I'm 34 and I'm a pediatric nurse, which means I can read a bruise the way my mother reads a church bulletin. Last September, my 7-year-old came back from a weekend at my sister's house and would not take off her hoodie. Not at dinner, not at bedtime. Not in a kitchen that still held the heat of the afternoon. I've spent 11 years learning what children's bodies say when children's mouths can't. So, I didn't yell and I didn't call my family. I took photographs. I drove to urgent care. I wrote down every time and every date the way I was trained to. By Friday, my sister's husband had lost the thing he loved most in this world. But it's what my mother did next, and what she offered me at the end that you won't believe. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where quiet people finally stop being quiet and families learn the cost of the things they buried. If stories like this hit close to home, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Now, let me take you back to that Sunday night to a purple hoodie zipped up to a small chin. Greg's truck pulled into my driveway at 6:00 on Sunday, right on schedule, because Greg Hensley was never late for anything in his life. He came up my porch steps carrying Maya's backpack, and his famous smile, the one that won him Teacher of the Year twice at Westbrook Middle School. "She's wiped out," he said. "Big weekend." My doorbell camera blinked its little blue light above his shoulder, the way it always did, recording nothing anybody ever needed. Mia slid past him without touching him. She hugged her backpack to her chest like a shield, and said hi to me in a voice I had to bend down to hear. She was wearing the purple hoodie Rachel bought her last year, zipped to the throat, hood strings pulled even. It was 78 Brie. At dinner, she moved her mac and cheese around the bowl and answered my questions in single syllables, which was not my kid. My kid narrates. My kid gives you the full documentary of every weekend, every dinosaur fact, every game of pretend until you beg her to breathe. That night, she asked to go to bed early. She climbed under her covers with the hoodie still on, and when I reached for the zipper to help her into pajamas, she rolled away from me and said she was cold. I stood in her doorway a long time. I told myself, kids get moody. I told myself it was nothing, and I knew I was lying because I've watched 100 parents in my clinic tell themselves the same thing in the same voice. 7-year-olds sleep hot. Mine slept zipped to the chin. You should know what my life looked like before that week, because it was a good life and I built it myself. I work 7 to 7 shifts at the pediatric clinic in Cedar Grove, Ohio, 3 days a week. I bought a small blue house with a crooked maple in the yard, and I make the mortgage every month with about $40 to spare. Maya's dad, Nick, lives 90 minutes away in Columbus. We divorced 4 years ago. Gently, the way you fold a flag, he takes her 1 weekend a month and never misses. And once a month, Mia had Aunt Weekend. That was Rachel's tradition, not mine. My sister runs a flower shop, has no kids yet, and loves my daughter with a fierceness I never doubted. For 3 years, Aunt Weekend meant Rachel and Mia baking too many cookies and watching mermaid movies while Greg graded papers somewhere in the background. He was furniture. Pleasant, admired furniture. That Saturday, a bride moved her wedding up a week, and Rachel got called in to build 40 centerpieces overnight. She texted me at 7 in the morning. "Greg's got Maya today. They'll have fun. Don't worry." I remember reading it in the break room and feeling nothing at all. That's the part I want you to sit with. There was no red flag to see. The man taught 200 kids a year. Parents fought to get their sons on his baseball team. If I had demanded to pick Mia up early because my sister went to work, my whole family would have called me dramatic. And honestly, that time they might have been right. On Monday morning, the hoodie came down to breakfast, and Mia said she wanted to wear it to school. We played school. She told me Sunday. That was all. We played school. Monday evening is bath night in my house. And bath night is sacred because Mia treats a bathtub like a private ocean, and I usually have to negotiate her out of it. That Monday, she stood in the hallway in her hoodie and told me she didn't want a bath. First time in her life. I kept my voice easy and my body low, the way I do at work with kids who flinch at the blood pressure cuff. I said, "Okay, no bath, but we do need clean clothes." And I moved the zipper down slowly with her watching my hands. She let me. That's the detail that still gets me. She let me like some part of her had been waiting for a grown up to insist. The hoodie came off and then her shirt sleeve rode up. And I stopped being her mother for about 10 seconds and became a nurse, because that was the only way to stay standing. Around her left upper arm, 4 oval bruises in a curve, green-brown going yellow at the edges. Each one the size of a fingertip. A fifth deeper on the inside of the arm where a thumb would go. On the backs of her thighs, 2 straight lines parallel, the width of a wooden spoon. I have charted marks like these on other people's children. There is a sentence we are trained to remember, and it scrolled through me like a banner. Fingertip bruising doesn't come from trampolines. It comes from hands. Mia watched my face the way kids do, checking if the world was about to break. So I made my face a kitchen table, flat and steady, something you can put weight on. I sat down on the edge of the tub, and I asked her the first question, the softest one I know. I asked her if her arm hurt, and she said, "Not anymore." I asked how it happened, and then I did the hardest thing a mother can do, which is stop talking. Silence is a room a child will walk into if you don't fill it first. It came out in pieces the way it always does. She spilled paint, the good paint on the carpet in the den on Saturday, when it was just her and Uncle Greg. "Uncle Greg has rules," she said to her knees. "Boy rules." He said. "Mom babies me." She said he grabbed her arm to pull her away from the carpet, and that his hand was really strong, and that the wooden spoon was for consequences, which is a word no 7-year-old brings home from a good weekend. Then she looked at the drain, and said the sentence I will hear for the rest of my life. He said, "What happens at their house stays at their house." Every alarm I own went off at once. And I silenced all of them because a pediatric nurse knows exactly what not to do next. You don't interrogate. You don't coach. You don't put words in a child's mouth that a defense attorney can later pull back out. I said, "Thank you for telling me." I said, "None of this was her fault." And I said, "The paint doesn't matter, honey. Carpets are just floor sweaters." She almost smiled. Then I dressed her in her softest pajamas, set her up with cartoons, and stepped into the hallway, where I photographed the bruises on my phone, with the ruler from her pencil box, for scale. Because my hands know procedures the way other hands know piano. Then I called the after-hours pediatric urgent care on Route 9, the one where Dr. Okafor was on shift, and I said the sentence that starts everything. "I'm bringing in my daughter and I need marks documented." Dr. Okafor has read more small bodies than anyone in this county, and she examined my daughter like Mia was made of library glass. She measured each bruise. She photographed them with the clinic camera better than my phone with case numbers in the frame. She asked Mia easy questions and wrote down hard answers. And when Mia said the thing about house rules, the doctor's pen did not pause, but her eyes found mine over the top of her glasses. Afterward, in the hallway, she said it plainly, colleague to colleague. "You know, I have to call. It stops being a family matter tonight. And here is a confession I've only made to you." What I felt was relief. Relief that the law made the choice, that the hotline call would come from a mandated reporter with a medical license, not from the little sister with a history of making things about herself, because I had been here before in a different body. When I was 15, our church choir director put his hand where no man's hand belongs, and I told my mother the same night. There was no mark to photograph. There was only my word, and in our house, my word weighed less than the family's good name. My mother made me apologize to him in our living room. In front of my father and Rachel, and a plate of untouched lemon bars, I said sorry to the man for the story. I learned the lesson she was teaching, just not the way she meant it. I learned that in this family, the truth needs paperwork. Driving home from urgent care, Mia asleep in the back seat. I understood the week ahead of me the way you understand weather coming. My family didn't know yet. By Tuesday, they would. Rachel called me Tuesday at noon, and I let it ring out because caseworkers advise you not to discuss an open report, and because I could already hear the shape of it. By 400, she had called our mother. By 6, Mom's book was in my driveway, uninvited, and she was at my kitchen table with her purse in her lap like a small dog. My mother raised 2 daughters, buried a husband, and has run the women's ministry at First Grace for 11 years. She is not a shout. She is a decider. She decides what a thing is, and then the family lives inside her decision. Rachel says, "You took the baby to a doctor," she said, "over some bruises. I'd like to see what all this fuss is." I could have refused. Instead, I called Mia down because some part of me, the 15-year-old probably, still believed that if my mother saw it with her own eyes, the eyes would win. Mia unzipped the hoodie herself. She pushed up the sleeve, and she watched her grandmother's face the exact way she had watched mine, checking if the world was about to break. My mother looked at that little arm for maybe 3 seconds. 3 seconds for 4 fingerprints and a thumb. Then she straightened her purse and delivered the verdict she had driven over with. "Kids bruise. Don't make this about you again." Again. That word did the work of a fist. It reached back 19 years, picked up a living room with lemon bars in it, and set it down on my kitchen table. Mia looked at me. I looked at my mother and I said nothing at all. I poured her decaf because she doesn't sleep on regular, and I asked about the flower arrangements for Sunday service. And at 7:40 she drove home believing she had settled. She had no idea about the photographs or the file, or the appointment already set for 900 a.m. Here's the thing about being talked over your whole life. You get quiet, and people mistake quiet for surrender. That night I did laundry and I left one item out. I folded the purple hoodie into a brown paper grocery bag, unwashed. The way we bag things at the clinic when they might matter later. I wrote the date and time on the outside in Sharpie. And I set the bag on top of my refrigerator, up where daily life couldn't touch it. Then I took the appointment card the caseworker had given me over the phone, Child Advocacy Center, Wednesday, 9:00 a.m., and pinned it to the fridge door with Maya's green dinosaur magnet. My kitchen, my case file. I called Nick in Columbus and told him everything in order. Dates first, the nurse's way. He was silent long enough that I checked the connection. Then he said, "Whatever you need. I'll sign whatever." And his voice had gravel in it that I hadn't heard since the divorce. At 11, Rachel finally got through by text. I stood at the counter and read it 4 times. "You're really doing this to us." To us, not. "Is she okay?" Not. "What did the doctor say?" My sister had already chosen her pronouns, and my daughter wasn't in them. I didn't answer. I checked the locks, turned off the lights, and looked at the paper bag one more time on my way to bed. Tomorrow, a stranger behind a one-way mirror would ask my daughter about boy rules. And there was one more thing I hadn't opened yet, sitting in an app on my phone, blinking like a little blue light. I hadn't thought about the doorbell camera until I was brushing my teeth, and then I stopped brushing. Sunday, my own porch. I sat on the bathroom floor in my scrub pants, and opened the app, and I scrolled back to the drop-off, and there it was filed under a date like any other Tuesday errand. 22 seconds, Greg's truck door. Mia climbing down slow, hugging her backpack, and then his hand. His whole hand wrapping her left upper arm and hauling her up my steps like a bag of mulch. His head bent low over hers and the microphone, catching what teachers' voices sound like when there's no class to perform for. "Quit the crying or I'll give you something to cry about." Left arm, exact arm. I sat there on the tile and matched a video to a bruise pattern the way I'd match a chart to a patient. And the coldness that came over me wasn't rage yet. It was recognition. He did this on my porch in the open with a camera over his shoulder, because it never crossed his mind that anything would come of it. Men like Greg don't hide because they've learned they don't have to. The whole town was his character witness. My own mother was his character witness. I watched it 4 times. Then I saved 3 copies, phone, cloud, and the old laptop that never leaves my closet. Because paperwork is the one language my family taught me fluently. Tomorrow at 9, my daughter would talk to a stranger behind a one-way mirror. And I would find out how deep this went. If you've ever had your own mother look at proof and call it drama, tell me in the comments how long it took you to stop asking for her permission. And subscribe, because what turned up in Greg's file at that school changes everything. The Child Advocacy Center in our county sits in a converted house on Birch Street, painted the color of butter with a waiting room full of donated stuffed animals that all look slightly too new. Nobody warns you how gentle the whole machine is. A woman named Carrie came out in a cardigan, got down on Maya's level, and introduced herself like they were about to be lab partners. She explained it to me in the hallway while Mia picked a seat. One interview. One time recorded so the child never has to tell it over and over to detectives and lawyers and judges. No leading questions, no mom in the room. I would watch from behind the glass. I've delivered hard news to parents for 11 years. And I thought that had taught me something about helplessness. And then I stood in a dim little room and watched my daughter through a one-way mirror holding a paper cup of coffee I never once drank. Here is what nobody tells you about being the parent behind the glass. Your whole body leans. The observing detective glanced at me twice. And I realized I had pressed my fingertips against the mirror frame like I could hold the room steady from outside it. Carrie started nowhere near Saturday. Favorite animal, 2nd grade. The difference between the truth and a lie, which Mia explained using dinosaurs, because of course she did. And then with no change of weather at all. Carrie slid a box of crayons across the table and asked Mia if she wanted to draw while they talked about Aunt Rachel's house. My daughter picked up a purple crayon. She looked at it for a second, put it back, and chose gray. Behind the glass in the dark, I got out my pen, because whatever she was about to say, somebody who loved her was going to write it down. I'm not going to give you my daughter's whole hour, because that hour belongs to her. But I'll give you what the report later put in writing in that flat language that somehow hurts worse than screaming. Child disclosed that maternal uncle by marriage enforces boy rules when alone with her. Child described being grabbed by the arm hard enough to make my teeth click. Child described being struck on the backs of the legs with a wooden spoon after a paint spill. Child stated the uncle said, "What happens at our house stays at our house." And then the part I hadn't seen coming. The part that turned the room I was standing in into a walk-in freezer. Carrie asked softly if Uncle Greg had rules like that just for her. And Mia said, "No," she said, easy as a spelling word. "He does the arm thing to the boys at practice when they cry. You're not supposed to cry on the team." The detective beside me wrote something fast. I stood very still doing math I didn't want to do. 200 students a year, 9 seasons of baseball. A whole town of parents fighting to get their sons onto his roster, and a locker room where crying had consequences. My daughter wasn't the first. She was just the first one whose mother charts for a living. Through the glass, Carrie was wrapping up, telling Mia she'd done a great job talking today. And Mia asked a question I couldn't hear that made Carrie smile. And my daughter walked out of that room lighter than she'd walked in. She had handed the weight to the grown-ups. That's the whole point of the building. In the parking lot, she fell asleep before I finished buckling her. And I sat in the driver's seat with my hands at 10 and 2, not driving, thinking about boys at practice. That afternoon, I sat across a folding table from Ms. Vance, the caseworker, a woman in her 40s with the tired, precise manner of somebody who does triage for a living. And I recognized her immediately as one of mine. I gave her everything in order. The urgent care records from Dr. Okafer already in the system. My photographs from Monday night with the ruler for scale and a USB drive with 22 seconds of video on it, plus the cloud link, plus the exact timestamp, plus a written page of every relevant date and time since Sunday at 6 p.m. She went through it once, then went through it again slower. And then she looked up at me differently than she'd looked at me when I walked in. "Documentation this clean, I don't see twice a year," she said. I told her I chart for a living. It's the only thing my hands know how to do with fear. We signed a safety plan on the spot. No contact between Maya and Greg Hensley, period, pending investigation. Nick's consent came back by email within the hour before the ink on mine was dry. Vance explained what would happen next. CPS assessment running alongside a police investigation, because patterned injuries plus a recorded threat meant law enforcement was already in it. Then she squared the papers on the table, and she paused in a way I knew from my own bad news doorways. That half second where you decide how much to tell a family. "There's something you should know about the school," she said about Westbrook. I put my pen down. Outside the window, somebody's minivan idled through the pickup line at the elementary school across the street. Normal life running on rails. Tell me, I said. And she did. What she told me stays sealed for a few more beats because that Wednesday night, my family got to it first, and you should feel the order of events the way I had to live them. At 9:00 p.m., Rachel sent a text to the family group thread. 14 people, aunts, uncles, both cousins in Florida, and I read it standing at my kitchen counter, with the paper bag over my head like a saint's halo, just so everyone hears it from me first. Mia fell off the trampoline Saturday. Kids get banged up and Abby is unfortunately going through a hard time since the divorce and needs attention and support right now. We love her. Please pray for our family. Read it again if you need to. My sister took a diagnosis she invented, wrapped it in a prayer request, and mailed it to everyone who shares my last name. It was genius. Honestly, you can't fight a prayer request. Swing at it, and you're exactly what it says you are. Within the hour, Aunt Carol called to tell me gently that counseling had done wonders for her neighbor's daughter. My uncle texted a thumbs up to nothing in particular, the way men do when they're choosing a side quietly. And at 11, Rachel sent one more message just to me this time. Kids bruise AB. They do. There it was. My mother's sentence in my sister's mouth. The family liturgy passing from one generation to the next like a casserole dish. I didn't type back. I opened my calendar instead and looked at the week laid out in little squares. And I counted the days to Friday because I knew something the group thread didn't. Processes had already started that no prayer request could reach. Mia slept with her lamp on that week. She'd never been a lamp kid. I found her Thursday morning, curled around her stuffed triceratops with the light burning yellow. And I turned it off and stood there while the sun came up, looking at my kitchen through the doorway at the brown paper bag sitting on top of the refrigerator. That bag ran my house that week. Every bowl of cereal got poured under it. Every phone call got made in its shadow. It sat up there over daily life the way the truth sits over a family. Ignorable, but only if nobody looks up. I want to tell you about Lois because you need to know where I come from. And it isn't only lemon bars. Lois was my charge nurse when I was 23 and green as June. I once lost a whole afternoon to a chart I'd let slide. A kid's reaction time I'd sworn I'd remember and didn't. And when I finished crying in the supply closet, Lois handed me a pen like it was a scalpel. Write it down, time and date, she said. Paper doesn't get tired and paper doesn't get scared. I built a career on that sentence, and that week I built a defense on it. A 3-ring binder from the office supply aisle. Urgent care discharge summary. Photolog safety plan copy, receipt for the co. 1 page per day with times down the margin. All official paper, all boring, all bulletproof. Somewhere around Thursday, I caught myself and laughed once, not nicely, alone at my kitchen table. My family hadn't asked a single question about Mia. And here I was assembling exhibits. Some part of me had already accepted that they'd put me on trial before they ever tried him. Thursday afternoon. Westbrook Middle School put Greg Hensley on administrative leave, and Cedar Grove found out before the buses finished their routes. Nobody official said a word. Which meant everybody unofficial said all of them. The parent Facebook group lit up like a fair. I wasn't named, but small towns don't need names. They have arrows, and most of them pointed at me. Best teacher my son ever had. This is what happens when families air their laundry. 2 Teacher of the Year awards. People too. Somebody's cousin heard it was all a custody thing. Somebody else posted a casserole sign up for Rachel, and it filled by supper, and I want you to sit with that. The wife of the man under investigation got 9 casseroles, and the 7-year-old with the bruises got a prayer request with her mother's name misspelled in the comments. That was the night I learned what it costs to be right too early in a town that has already decided. And then at 11:40, my phone lit up with a message request from a name I didn't know, a woman. Her son had been on Greg's team 2 springs ago, a catcher, a crier. She'd complained to the school back then about grip marks on her boy's arm after a tournament, about a phrase the boys repeated like a joke that wasn't one. The vice principal had thanked her for her feedback. The word they used in the file, she said, was unsubstantiated. They made me feel crazy, she wrote. My husband said, let it go. Everybody loves the guy. Then 3 dots, a long pause, and one more line that I read standing up. Is your daughter okay? I didn't know this woman, but I knew her exactly. And she had kept the emails. Every reply the school ever sent her with the dates on them. Here's what Wednesday's sealed news was. The thing Ms. Vance had told me at the folding table. That mother's complaint had never fully died. It sat in a drawer at the district office, stamped unsubstantiated, waiting for a second data point. I was the second data point. A patterned injury documented by a physician, a forensic disclosure mentioning boys at practice, a police case number, and a recorded sentence on a porch. When all of that landed on the State Board of Education's desk, next to a 2-year-old complaint that rhymed with it, the machine that had been idling for years finally turned over. Friday morning, the board issued an emergency suspension of Greg Hensley's teaching license. Effective immediately, pending a full revocation hearing. The district opened termination proceedings the same day. The letters called it an emergency suspension. The town called it what it was. By Friday, my sister's husband had lost his teaching license. The local paper gave it a short paragraph with no names, and Cedar Grove filled the names in by lunch. And I sat with the news alone in my driveway on a Friday afternoon, and waited to feel the thing you're supposed to feel. And it didn't come. My daughter still slept with her lamp on. My sister posted a wedding photo that evening, the two of them laughing under fairy lights, captioned, 9 years strong with a heart. My mother said nothing at all to anyone. And if you knew my mother, you'd understand that her silence wasn't peace. It was a held breath. Silence I could handle. I'd been raised in it, I knew its floor plan. It was Friday night, a little after 9, when my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I thought about the caseworker, the detective, the school. A dozen official strangers who had my number now. And I answered like a professional. It was my mother. She was calling from her friend in Eunice's phone. And the first thing she said before hello was, I figured you'd blocked me. I hadn't. I'd blocked Rachel. I'd blocked the group thread. I'd blocked an aunt or two, but never her. And she'd assumed it anyway. And there's a whole sermon in that assumption if you want one. Her voice was different than Tuesday. Slower, older. For one dangerous second, I thought the week had cracked something open in her. Sunday, she said, you'll come to the house. The whole family needs to sit down and talk about how we fix this while it can still be fixed. I waited for it. One question about Mia. How's she sleeping? Does her arm hurt? Is she scared of men now? My granddaughter. The girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder at Christmas Eve service. It never came. Not Tuesday at my kitchen table, not Friday on Eunice's phone, not once in between. My mother had performed 63 years of hospitality and never learned the one question that matters. I looked down the hallway at the yellow line under Maya's door, her lamp burning against whatever came at night now. And I heard myself say, I'll come. Not because I owed that living room anything, because I'm a nurse and we don't skip the hard conversations. And because some doors, you need to watch close for the last time. Before I walk into that room, if your family ever held a meeting about you instead of for you, put the word meeting in the comments. I read everyone. What my mother offered me at that table is the part I still lose sleep over. My mother's living room has not moved a picture frame in 20 years. The family photos march up the staircase wall in matching gold frames, level as a hospital hallway, and growing up, I thought that was what love looked like. Everything straightened, everything dusted, nothing asked. Sunday at 2. That room was arranged like a proceeding. Aunt Carol and her husband on the sofa, my uncle by the window with his arms crossed. Rachel in the wingback chair, eyes pink, and beside her one empty kitchen chair, carried in and left vacant, which told me Greg had been advised by his lawyer not to attend, and that somebody in this family had decided the chair should sit there anyway, representing him, like a flag on an embassy. I took the piano bench. Nobody offered me coffee, which in my mother's house is a verdict all by itself. On the coffee table squared to the wood grain, sat a single typed page. I recognized the font of a law office. They called it a clarifying statement. One paragraph already drafted for my signature in which I acknowledged that I may have misunderstood the context of the weekend. That Mia bruises easily and had been on a trampoline, and that our family had addressed the matter privately and considered it resolved. Considered it resolved. Somewhere a lawyer named Tom Pute had typed those words, and my family had printed them on the good printer. And all week I'd assumed Rachel would be the one to slide the page across the table to me. I was wrong. My mother reached out and turned it to face me and smoothed it flat with one pass of her hand, the way she smooths altar linens. And then she looked up at me with something I'd never once seen in her eyes. Hope. They took turns and it was almost choreographed. And maybe it was. My family rehearses its spontaneity like a choir. Aunt Carol went first, hands folded. Think of the family's good name. My father built that name. Did I want strangers on Facebook chewing on it? My uncle next from the window without uncrossing his arms. Men teach boys the way men teach boys. His own daddy's belt had made him who he was. And I bit down hard on the obvious reply. Then Rachel, witted, leaning forward like we were girls again. Sharing a bathroom sink. You're killing my marriage, Abby. You know that, right? You're killing it. Her marriage. Killing it. There's a kind of accounting where a man's job, a man's name, a man's comfort go in the ledger, and a child's arm doesn't make the page. And I was watching my whole family do that math without a calculator. Fluent from memory and threaded through all of it. The same refrain in 3 voices. My mother's sentence passed around the room like a collection plate. This isn't about you, Abby. Stop making this about you. It's not about you. They'd said it to me at 15. They'd said it over lemon bars. The remarkable thing is that they were right, and none of them could hear it. I let the room go quiet. Then I asked my one question in the voice I use at the clinic for the parents who won't look at the X-ray. Has one person in this room asked how Mia is sleeping? 5 seconds. I counted them by the mantel clock my father wound every Sunday of his life. 5 whole seconds. And my uncle looked out the window and Rachel looked at her hands, and my mother looked at the paper on the table. That was the answer. That was the whole family answering. My mother broke the silence because silence in that house belongs to her, and she doesn't lend it long. Sign the paper. Abby, she said quietly, terribly kindly. Sign it and Sunday dinners go back to normal, and we will never speak of this again. Everyone makes mistakes, even you. Even me. I looked at the page one more time. The font, the phrase considered it resolved, the little line waiting for my name. And I thought about every chart I have ever signed in 11 years. Every time my signature meant this happened, I saw it. You can build on this. A signature is the most honest thing I own. And they were asking me to spend it on fiction. I stood up from the piano bench and buttoned my coat. And I said it without heat, the way you read out a lab result. I sign charts, not fiction. Then I crossed the room to my mother and I kissed her on the cheek, and she let me confused, because she could feel what it was and couldn't name it yet. I could. It was the kiss you give the door of a house you grew up in on the morning the moving truck comes. I walked out through the kitchen, past the lemon bar pan sitting clean in the drying rack, and I let the screen door close behind me on its own slow spring. It didn't slam, it clicked. There are doors that click shut louder than any slam. In the car with my hands at 10 and 2, I didn't cry and I didn't shake. I opened the note app on my phone, and I typed because I am my mother's daughter in exactly one way that saved me. Sunday, 14:12 p.m. refused to sign. Tuesday's mail brought me an envelope with a law firm's name in the corner. Thick paper. The kind of stationery that's supposed to make your hands sweat before you've read a word. Tom Pute, Esquire, representing Gregory Hensley, wished to advise me that my false and defamatory statements had damaged his client's reputation and livelihood, and demanded that I cease and desist, and reserved all rights to pursue remedies. I read it twice at the kitchen table, and I'll be honest with you. The first read got my pulse up, which is exactly the fee that letter was written to collect. The second read, I started noticing things. It demanded I stop making statements without listing one statement I'd made, because I hadn't made any. No Facebook post, no group text, not one word in the school pickup line. Everything I knew had gone to exactly 3 places. a doctor, a caseworker, and a detective. So, Wednesday. I spent the roof money, 300, 1 hour, a consultation with an attorney 2 towns over who had kind eyes, and a boxer's handshake. She read the letter in about 90 seconds and slid it back across the desk. Good faith reports to child services and licensing boards are protected in Ohio. She said, "This is a scare letter. You'd be amazed how often it works. Not on somebody raised by Sandra Atwood," I told her. I went home, and I wrote the date and time of receipt in the top corner of Pute's letter, and I punched 3 holes in it and clipped it into the binder. Another exhibit in a case my family thought was about them. I've been peed on by nicer people than my brother-in-law's lawyer. At the grocery store that week, 2 mothers switched checkout lanes to avoid me. I noticed I kept my spine straight and bought the good cereal. That woman, I was her now. Fine. That woman documents. The following Saturday, my mother came to my house unannounced, and she would not come in. She stood on my porch in her church coat, under the little blue light of the doorbell camera, and if she noticed the irony, she kept it to herself. Mia was at Nick's for the weekend. Maybe my mother knew that. She keeps the family calendar in her head like scripture. "I'm going to tell you something once," she said, "and then we're never going to speak of it." And on my own porch, my mother handed me the only inheritance that was ever truly hers to give. She was 25, she said. Rachel was a baby then. I wasn't born yet, sleeping in the back room of my grandmother's house. The night my mother showed up there with her left wrist broken in 2 places. She never said my father's name in the whole story, and she didn't need to. Her mother, my grandmother, the woman whose pie crust our whole family still brags about, made her a cup of tea, wrapped the wrist in his dish towel, and told her, "Kids bruise and wives bruise too. Go home before he notices you're gone." So, she went home. "I stayed 40 years, Abby," my mother said. And her voice didn't wobble, which was the worst part, how load-bearing it was. "You think I don't know what I'm asking you? I know exactly what I'm asking you. I'm asking you to do what I did because it's the only thing I know how to survive." For a moment, she wasn't my judge. She was a 25-year-old with a dish towel on her wrist, and the chain ran straight through her, hot to the touch, 3 generations long. And I finally saw that she wasn't guarding Greg at all. She was guarding the sentence that had cost her everything. Because if it wasn't sacred, then what had she paid for? "Withdraw the statement," she said. "No, Mom," I said, "but now I finally understand you." She nodded once like a woman leaving a graveside, and walked back to her Bic, and the camera over my door recorded her all the way down the steps. 3 weeks later, the machine finished its first pass. Ms. Vance called me on a Tuesday morning. The AY's finding was substantiated, physical abuse, and the file was closed on her end with the safety plan standing. The same week, Greg took a plea on the criminal side, child endangerment, a misdemeanor, probation, plus a court-ordered behavior program, and a no-contact order with Mia that a judge signed with a real pen in a real courtroom, while I sat in the second row on my lunch break in my scrubs. His lawyer had done what lawyers do, contained it. A misdemeanor is a paper cut to a man like Greg. The wound that wouldn't close was the license. The state board's letter arrived that Friday addressed to me. Witness notice enclosed. A full revocation hearing scheduled 5 weeks out in Columbus. My testimony was requested, and one sentence sat at the bottom of the page like a stone in a shoe. Hearings of the board are open to the public and proceedings are entered into the public record. There was more. Vance told me the board's investigator had subpoenaed the district's files. And the 2-year-old complaint from the catcher's mother was in the packet now, along with the visa principal replies. "Thanks for the feedback, unsubstantiated, filed, and forgotten." That mother had been summoned, too. Her emails had dates on them. The system that had shrugged at her was about to read its own handwriting out loud into a microphone on the record. I stood at my counter holding the letter looking at the words public record, and I understood the price tag on them precisely. Cedar Grove would hear every word I said. My family would hear every word I said. Public record. 2 words that would cost me the last thing I had left. You should know that by then I already had everything I'd set out to get. Sit with that because I had to. The finding was substantiated. The no-contact order had a judge's signature. Greg would never be alone with my daughter again as long as I breathed. And his career in Ohio was almost certainly over. No matter what I did next, the board had the file, the plea, the prior complaint. My testimony was requested, not required. I could skip Columbus entirely, and the machine would grind on slower, quieter, more appealable. But on my want, as a counselor might put it, was in the bank. So, what exactly would I be standing up in that hearing room for? I was still turning that over 2 nights later when my door creaked at 200 a.m., and Mia padded in with her triceratops and folded herself against my side. And I thought she'd gone back to sleep, when her voice came up out of the dark, small and completely awake. Is Uncle Greg going to be a teacher somewhere else? 7 years old, she'd found the exact hole in the fence. Surrender a license in one state and 30 mem across a river. There are whole school districts that will see a clean L-looking man with 2 awards and no felony, because misdemeanors and quiet resignations don't always travel. Unless somebody stands up in the public record and staples the whole story together on purpose out loud. I don't know, baby, I said. Which was the truth that night. She was asleep in minutes. I lay there until the window went gray, listening to her breathe. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand a little after 6, a voicemail, an unknown number. My mother had gotten up early. I sat on the edge of my bed and played it. And my mother's voice came out of the phone gentler than I have ever heard it. Gentler than Lillibibis because she never sang those. She'd been to see it. She said it was all arranged, all but signed. Greg would voluntarily surrender his Ohio license before the hearing date. He and Rachel would move. She said it plainly. Out of state, a fresh start. And the hearing would be cancelled because there'd be nothing left to revoke. He's gone, Abby. Out of your life. Out of the baby's life for good. You get everything you wanted. A pause. Tape hissing softly. My mother breathing. All you have to do is not go to Columbus. Don't testify. Let it end quiet. And then honey, you come back. Sunday dinner, your chair. Like none of this happened. Mia gets her grandmother, you get your mother. Don't make me choose in front of the whole church. Abby, come home. I sat there in the gray morning light with the phone warm against my ear. And I want to be honest with you about what that voicemail was because it would be easy to lie. It was not a threat. It was the single most generous offer my mother had ever made me in 34 years. By her arithmetic, she was handing me the whole estate, the enemy banished. The daughter restored, the family whole, the surface repaired. Everything she knew how to give was in it. And the thing I couldn't say out loud with Mia asleep down the hall, was that I wanted it. Some 15-year-old in me wanted it so badly my teeth ached. There was only one item missing from the deal, and it didn't have a name yet, and it wasn't mine. I didn't call anyone that night, and I want you to notice that because I noticed it. Lois is retired in Florida now growing tomatoes. I could have called her, and she'd have answered on the second ring, and I didn't because at some point being grown means the hotline is you. I stood in my kitchen after Maya went down under the paper bag on the refrigerator, and I took the offer apart the way I'd take apart a suspicious chart line by line. Voluntarily surrender his Ohio license. I'm a nurse. I know what happens when a problem transfers instead of resolves. We have a phrase for doctors who resign quietly ahead of the review board. Passing the trash, they call it ugly and accurate. And the license he'd surrender here would be a clean L-looking gap on a resume in Indiana, in Kentucky, in any district across any river where a charming man with 2 awards fills out an application. And some mother I will never meet reads the parent Facebook group and fights to get her son on his roster. A surrender ends the paperwork. A revocation sworn public on the record follows the man. I stood there doing that math. And then I made myself do the other column because honesty was the whole point now. Sunday dinner, my chair. My mother alive and not yet old, and the years left with her and Maya, in a grandmother's kitchen at Christmas and the word home, meaning an address again instead of a wound. That column was real. Anyone who tells you that column weighs nothing has never had a mother. I walked down the hall and stood in Mia's doorway. Watching her sleep with the lamp on, one arm around the triceratops, the other flung out, sleeve ridden up. the last yellow ghost of a fingerprint still on her arm. If you knew where to look, I knew where to look. Somewhere out there were kids whose mothers didn't. 9 a.m. tomorrow, one more 9 a.m. appointment. All I had to decide was whether I was a filing cabinet or a witness. The hearing room in Columbus was smaller than television teaches you to expect. A U of tables, a state flag drooping in the corner, a ceiling fan with a tick in it, a stenographer whose fingers never seemed to move and never seemed to stop. Board members in good suits with water bottles. A handful of public chairs, mostly empty, mostly second row, aisle seat, church hat squared level as a picture frame. My mother, she hadn't come to support me. I knew that with total certainty. She had come because hope dies hard in organized women. And some part of her believed to the final minute that her daughter would look at those empty chairs and lose her nerve and come home. The catcher's mother sat 3 seats down from her, clutching a folder of printed emails, and the two of them did not know each other, and between them sat everything wrong with how this town loves its men. I was called. I carried my binder to the witness table. 9 weeks of my life in 3 rings, and I set it down square to the table's edge. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I left it closed. Paper doesn't get tired and paper doesn't get scared. But paper also doesn't get to choose. And today was about choosing. I raised my right hand. I swore. And then in the voice I use for handoffs at shift change. No adjectives, no trembling. Dates first. I told them about a purple hoodie in September. Urgent care. Monday, 9:40 p.m., 4 fingertip bruises and a thumb, left upper arm, photographed with a ruler. The interview on Birch Street, Wednesday, 9:00 a.m., and then I asked the board's counsel for permission to submit one item into the public record. 22 seconds of video from my own front door with its audio and my written timeline behind it. So that the next school that Googles his name, I said, finds more than a resume. Counsel looked at the chair. The chair nodded. In a quiet room in front of a state flag and a stenographer and my mother's level hat. They pressed play. You could hear the truck door twice. Once from the speakers, once bouncing off the back wall of a room built for reading statutes out loud. Then his voice, the after-hours voice, the one 200 parents a year never got to hear, filling a state hearing room at official volume. Quit the crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Nobody gasped. That's not what rooms like that do. What they do is go still all at once. The way a ward goes still when a monitor alarm sounds. And in that stillness, I watched the board members not look at each other. And I watched the stenographers' hands, and I watched my mother, second row, whom I had not stopped watching, if I'm honest, since I raised my right hand. She stood up while the recording was still playing. She gathered her purse the way she gathers hymnals, without hurry, with terrible dignity, and she walked up the aisle and out of the hearing room, and the door was easing shut behind her, when the board's counsel asked me his final question. Mrs. Atwood, you understand that members of your own family characterized this testimony as personally motivated. Every face at the U of tables came up and waited. And I leaned in toward the microphone, and I answered him, and I answered the closing door, and I answered a living room with lemon bars in it 19 years gone. It was never about me. That was the point. And there, with my hand flat on a binder I never had to open, the strangest calm settled over me. And I finally understood my own steadiness. All my life I'd carried paper, because I believed my word alone weighed nothing. My family had weighed it for me once, and I'd accepted the number. The binder was never armor. It was a permission slip I kept renewing, and I was done renewing it. 40 minutes later the board voted unanimous to revoke the teaching license of Gregory Hensley, said revocation to be reported to the National Educator Clearinghouse, flagged in every state permanent. Both doors of that sentence closed at the same time. He would never stand in front of children again, and my mother's car was already gone from the lot. In the hallway outside, the catcher's mother caught my sleeve, and this stranger hugged me the way family is supposed to, and mostly doesn't. Folder of emails crushed between us. They told me I was crazy, she said into my shoulder, wedded, furious, free, 2 years. They had me convinced, and you wrote it all down, she testified after me. I stayed and listened from the back row, and her dates matched her emails, and her emails matched the district's file, and I watched a vice principal's polite brush-offs get read into the record one by one. Thanks for the feedback at official volume. The machine wasn't just taking a man's license. It was reading its own handwriting out loud. And rooms change after they do that. Policies were rewritten in that district by Christmas. Out in the parking lot, the spot where my mother had parked was empty, a rectangle of clean asphalt in a wet lot. And under my windshield wiper, there was a church note card. Cream-colored, her blue ballpoint folded once. I stood in the drizzle and opened it. It said, "You chose. That's all. No signature." She knew I'd know the hand. I sat in the driver's seat for a while, engine off, watching the drops gather and run. And then I said it out loud, alone, to the rearview mirror, to the empty rectangle of asphalt, to her. Yes, finally. I put the note card in the binder, last exhibit, case closed. And I drove 90 minutes home doing the speed limit because there was a second grader getting out of school at 3:15. And for the first time in 9 weeks, I had good news that belonged only to her. 3 months is enough time to count what a choice cost. So, let me give you the ledger. Plain, both columns. Greg and Rachel moved 2 states away in November. She stayed, and I've stopped being surprised. She posted a picture of their new front porch captioned, "New chapter," and the casserole ladies of Cedar Grove sent a card shower after them like confetti after a parade. The license didn't travel. Revoked is revoked. Flagged in the clearinghouse. Every state. And somewhere out there is a mother who will never know my name, whose son will get a different coach. And that's the whole prize. That's what I bought. It was worth it. And it cost what it cost. Those 2 facts live in my house now like a married couple. My mother and I have not spoken since the hearing. In December, a birthday card came for Mia. Father's inside, signed Grandma in blue ballpoint. No note, no mention. The family art form love with everything load-bearing removed. I let Mia decide because that's the house I run now. She read it twice, said, "Tell her thank you," and stuck it to the refrigerator with the green dinosaur magnet down low at her height. A full arm length below where the paper bag used to sit. The bag itself is gone. The police returned the hoodie after the plea, and I asked Mia what she wanted done with it. Braced for anything, and she thought about it the way she thinks about dinosaur facts and said, "Donate it. Some kid might just be cold." So, we washed it together and put it in the donation bin. And the top of my refrigerator holds nothing now but dust and a casserole dish nobody's coming to fill. Mia turned her lamp off for good in the 9th week. I didn't say anything and neither did she. Her counselor told me more than any chart could in one line. She knows the adults handled it. And in January in the checkout line, a distant cousin of Nick's leaned down at Maya with his arms out the way men do at kids they barely know. Hug for the aunties. Come on now. My daughter took half a step back and looked up at me. Not scared. Checking which kind of family she lives in. "You don't have to hug anyone," I said. And the man straightened up embarrassed and made a joke. And Mia took my hand, and we paid for our groceries. Somewhere 3 generations back. A chain link tested daily since finally just didn't hold. It's a Saturday morning in early spring now. There's a 7-year-old at my kitchen table narrating a documentary about pterosaurs to a bowl of cereal. Wearing a hoodie she picked out herself with her birthday money. Yellow, loud as a school bus. And unzipped because it's warm in my kitchen, and she has absolutely nothing to hide. I still write everything down. Some habits are load-bearing. But it's different now. And I can tell you exactly how I used to write things down, so that someday somebody would have to believe me. Now I write things down to remember how far we've come. My mother told me kids bruise and she wasn't wrong. She was just finishing the sentence too early. The way her mother taught her. Kids bruise, they also heal. If somebody stops pretending not to see, here's what I know now, and it's the only wisdom I've got. I lost my mother's table. And I kept my daughter's voice. And if that's the price of a child growing up certain she'll be believed, I paid it. And I'd pay it again. That's my story. 1 hoodie in September, 1 sentence from my mother, and a 900 a.m. appointment that changed 2 families. If this reminded you of a child who needs one adult to believe them, be that adult. Write it down. Time and date. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs it. Drop a comment and subscribe. I'll see you in the next visual art and design.